My name's Max. I'm the Assets Technical Director at Miris. I'm going to be showing you guys how to prep assets for Miris from Blender. Brief overview. So we're basically going to import an asset, make all files reference locally, add a dome light, compensate for Miris lighting differences, set unit of measurement, color space, and then export a USD. And all of these steps can be found online, as well as reference materials, including all of the files I'll be using and saving out today. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. So we are going to be starting with a default Blender scene, and I'm just going to delete the camera, cube, and light. Then I'm going to import a USD, and you guys could import an FBX or an OBJ instead if you prefer. So how I have my folder structured at the moment is I have my asset I'm going to be importing. So for this purpose, a USD, and then I have a textures folder that will contain all of the textures I'll be using for this asset. And if you have any other files you're referencing, you would want to include them in a folder at the same level. So I'm going to go ahead and click the USD. And it's important to note that we want relative paths. So if there's anything pointing to a file that's specific to your machine, then that, even if that file gets uploaded, if it's on a D drive, then we won't be able to path it to your asset. And so you want to make sure that all paths are relative. And then we want to import all materials and reference existing names. And then we can go ahead and import that. And that looks good. We've got textures and we have no lights, which is what we want. So once the asset has been imported, then I'm going to go ahead and save the scene. And now it's pathing it to where I imported that USD. So I'm just going to go ahead and save it as blue. Great. And then what we're going to do is file external data, make paths relative. So we want all assets that are referenced or textures that are referenced to be in relation to the Blender file and the USD file. So if anything is not relative, then it might not be included. And then we're also going to do file external data, unpack resources. So if anything is baked in, we want it to be external and in that textures folder or in the extra, referenced other asset folder. So that's great. So now the scene's a bit more set up. So if you wanted to add any geometry in Blender, you could do that now. Or if you wanted to add any more materials, you could do that. But keep in mind that we are only using USD Preview Surfaces and MaterialX. So if you have any render specific materials, you're going to have to convert them to, I would recommend USD Preview Surfaces, but you could do that or MaterialX. So, but I would make sure that you double check that in USD Preview Surfaces, it translates over. So cool. So then we kind of want to prep it to look how the asset is going to look in Miris. So first things first, we're going to change the render engine to cycles. And then we're also going to change the color management. So display should be sRGB. And then view should be ACES 2.0, which makes things a little darker, which is fine. And then we're going to add a dome light. And there's a few different ways of doing it in Blender, but this method works with Miris. So we're going to add an environment texture. And then we're going to open the textures folder and click on the HDRI. And you guys should have a couple different options for HDRIs as well. Cool. So this is looking good. And maybe you want to turn it up to 1.1. Awesome. So this is looking closer. However, in the Miris viewer, the dome line is going to be rotated 180 degrees. So what we're going to do is go to the world shader, and we're just going to compensate for that just so you guys can have like a one-to-one comparison and get your asset set up. So we're going to add a texture coordinate. And then we're also going to apply a mapping node. And then I'm just going to flip it 180 degrees. Cool. So that's also looking closer. Great. Okay. So this, how it's set up right now, is how the asset is going to be rendered and streamed. And so if you want to make any additional changes to the strength, you're welcome to. However, Miris will be rendering significantly darker. So in order to compensate for that lighting difference, what we're going to do is add a couple more nodes. So we're going to add a multiply node, multiply vector, and then we're also going to add a background node. So these are kind of Miris specific numbers. So the strength for these Miris specific exposure values will always be 1,000. And then this Miris special value will be 500 for all three. If the exposure that we liked was 1, but if the dome light was darker and we wanted strength of 2, then all of these would be 1,000. But since our strength that we like is 1.1, then all of these values will be 550. I know, and you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this is so blown out. This is like, can that be right? It is right. And that is how it is going to be exported. So the assets that we'll need to export, sorry, it's a bit confusing. I'm going to add a framing node to kind of hopefully make things a bit more clear. So we are going to be using the nodes in the frame that will be exported. So these 4 nodes, so the HDRI, the multiply node, the background with the strength of 1,000, and then the world output are all necessary to export for Miris. But again, if you want to go back and look at how it's actually going to be viewed, you can go ahead and connect these nodes back. And that's how you'll be viewing it and streaming it in Miris later. So once that's looking good, we can kind of keep those nodes connected since we'll be exporting them at the end. And then I would like to make sure that the scene units are in meters. So that has to say meters. If it's not, it'll come on up along scale and we will not, or you will not. You'll be bummed. But anyways, so that's that. And yeah, once scale has been set, you're good to save and export. So I'm just going to save the scene. And then we're going to go ahead and export since we have those 4 nodes connected that are in the frame with the really bright exposure. We can go ahead and export out the asset. And I'll just call it bloom since it now has a light. And we want to check that meters is selected, relative paths is selected, and we do have a world dome light, so that needs to be selected. And we're going to export USD Preview Surface Network. And we want to export textures and preserve them. So that's super important. And then we can export. Cool. So you're pretty much good. As long as you selected relative paths and those are all local. So what I'm going to do is make a folder, and I guess we'll just call it Bloom Upload. And you can put your textures and your USD into that folder. So now when you go to upload your asset, when it prompts you to upload a folder, you can just select Bloom Upload and it'll upload the USD and the textures. And since everything's referenced, you should be good to upload that. Cool. And don't forget that these assets might take a couple to a few hours, so maybe kick them off overnight. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Happy to help with anything and really looking forward to seeing what you guys think. Bye.